The hunter had just finished preparing dinner. Fresh fish rested beside roasted meat, while berries and nuts were neatly arranged on large leaves. Beside him, Dino stared at the food with growing excitement. He sniffed the air, then slowly moved closer and closer, as if getting nearer would somehow make dinner arrive faster. For the two friends, meals like this felt perfectly normal. A little meat, some fish, a few plants, and whatever nature had provided that day. But when most people imagine the Ice Age, they picture something very different. A world filled with snow, gigantic mammoths, and humans eating nothing but meat. After all, how could plants possibly survive in such a frozen world? Were our ancestors really living on mammoth steaks alone, or is the truth far more complicated? To answer that question, we need to travel back to one of the harshest periods in human history and discover what was really on the menu during the Ice Age. The Ice Age was unlike anything most people experience today. Temperatures were lower, huge ice sheets covered vast regions of the planet, and survival was never guaranteed. But despite its name, the world was not entirely covered in snow. Different regions looked very different. Some places were freezing grasslands. Others contained forests, rivers, and open plains. And wherever humans went, finding food became their greatest challenge. There were no farms, no grocery stores, and certainly no refrigerators. Every meal had to be found, or earned. Failure could mean starvation. Success meant another day of survival. Yet despite these harsh conditions, humans managed to spread across much of the world. And to do that, they needed much more than luck. They needed flexibility. Today, many people believe Ice Age humans ate almost nothing but meat. The image seems simple. A group of hunters kills a mammoth. Everyone enjoys a feast. And then they repeat the process again and again. But reality was rarely that simple. Large animals were dangerous. Successful hunts were never guaranteed. And mammoths were not waiting around to become dinner. In fact, many scientists now believe that Ice Age diets were far more varied than most people imagine. Different groups ate different foods, and their diets depended heavily on where they lived. People living near rivers consumed more fish. Those near forests relied on nuts and berries, and others hunted whatever animals were available. There was no universal Ice Age menu. Humans adapted to their surroundings, and that ability may have been one of the secrets behind our success. This doesn't mean meat wasn't important. Far from it. Animal foods provided valuable protein and fat was especially important in cold environments. Humans hunted deer, bison, wild horses, reindeer, rabbits, birds, and sometimes even mammoths. But giant animals were not everyday meals. A successful mammoth hunt could feed an entire group for weeks, perhaps even longer, but such opportunities were rare. Most of the time, people focused on smaller and more accessible animals. They also caught fish, collected shellfish, and scavenged whenever possible. Nothing was wasted. Skin became clothing. Bones became tools. And every calorie mattered. Because in the Ice Age, food wasn't just something people enjoyed. It was something people fought to obtain. Plants rarely appear in movies about prehistoric humans, but they were often an important part of the diet. People gathered berries, roots, tubers, seeds, wild fruits, and edible nuts. Some groups even collected mushrooms and honey. These foods provided vitamins and carbohydrates, and unlike large animals, plants didn't fight back. Of course, finding edible plants required knowledge. One mistake could be deadly. Some berries were poisonous. Certain mushrooms could kill. And seasons changed everything. Foods available during summer might disappear completely during winter, which meant early humans had to understand nature extremely well. They had to know where food could be found and when, because survival depended on that knowledge. To understand the Ice Age diet, we first need to understand the Ice Age itself. The Ice Age didn't last for a few centuries. or even a few thousand years. It lasted for millions of years. The period began roughly 2.6 million years ago. Modern humans appeared much later, around 300,000 years ago. And the coldest part of the Ice Age reached its peak around 20,000 years ago. Finally, about 11,700 years ago, the last Ice Age came to an end. That's an enormous amount of time. And during all those years, human diets constantly changed. At first, our ancestors simply ate whatever they could find. Later, they became more skilled hunters. They developed better tools, learned new techniques, and expanded into new environments. As they adapted, their diets evolved as well. Looking at human history as a whole, there was never a single Ice Age diet. There were countless diets, spread across thousands of generations. A family living near the ocean ate differently from one living deep inside a forest. People living near rivers often depended heavily on fish. Coastal communities collected shellfish. Groups living in colder regions relied more on animal fat. Meanwhile, humans living in warmer areas consumed more fruits and plants. Scientists studying ancient teeth and bones have discovered something remarkable. Human beings were incredibly adaptable. They could survive in deserts, grasslands, forests, and frozen environments. Instead of forcing nature to adapt to them, humans adapted to nature. And perhaps that flexibility became one of our greatest advantages. Life during the Ice Age was far from comfortable. There were no guarantees. A failed hunt could mean disaster. Sometimes animals migrated away. Sometimes winter lasted longer than expected. Sometimes food simply became scarce. Entire groups could spend days without a successful hunt, and hunger was always waiting. People learned to dry meat, store food, and use every part of an animal. Nothing could be wasted, because wasting food meant risking death. Survival demanded patience, planning, and cooperation. The Ice Age was not a time of endless feasts. It was a time of uncertainty, and our ancestors faced that uncertainty every single day. Today, millions of people follow something known as the Paleo Diet. The idea is simple: eat like our ancestors, avoid processed foods, and return to nature. But there's one problem. Which ancestors? And from which part of the world? Scientists know that prehistoric humans consumed a wide variety of foods. Some groups ate more meat, others consumed more plants, and many diets changed with the seasons. In other words, there was no single paleo menu. Human diets were constantly changing, just like humans themselves. And perhaps that's exactly why our species became so successful. Not because we followed one perfect diet, but because we could adapt. So, what might a normal day of eating have looked like? Breakfast might have been a handful of berries, perhaps some nuts, or leftover meat from the previous day. Lunch could have been fish, or roots gathered from nearby land. And if the hunters were successful, dinner might include roasted meat cooked over a fire. But not every day ended with a feast. Some days were disappointing, and some days there was almost nothing to eat. Life during the Ice Age was unpredictable, and every meal represented another victory against nature. Back in the prehistoric valley, dinner was finally ready. The hunter carefully placed the food on large leaves: fish, roasted meat, berries, and a handful of nuts. Dino's eyes grew wide. His patience had officially run out. Before the hunter could even sit down, Dino was already reaching toward the food with unstoppable enthusiasm. For them, meals like this were simply part of everyday life. But behind every meal we enjoy today lies a story that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. A story of survival, adaptation, and endless curiosity. Because humans survived the Ice Age not because they had one perfect food or one perfect strategy. They survived because they learned to adapt. And perhaps that has always been humanity's greatest strength. Not our claws, not our teeth, not our speed, but our incredible ability to survive almost anywhere and to make the most of whatever nature provides.